Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we are back with another deck profile post Battle of Chaos. A deck that I have, always liked since it came out is S-Force, and it finally gets two new cards of support in this set. They are helpful, but they are not necessarily game-changing. But I also haven't done an S-Force deck profile pretty much since the deck came out. So I do want to do an update here and, just see where the deck is at. Because I think it is a cool deck, and I do think it does do a couple of things really well, although I do have my problems with the deck. I'll probably mention those while we go through the deck profile. But yeah, it's a really cool control strategy. It grinds really well. The trap card was so monumental for making that possible. And yeah, let's just get into this thing. Let's just get in. All right, so starting off, of course, with our monster lineup here for the S-Forces. We start off with our triple S-Force Rappa Chiyomaru. This is by far and away the best card in the deck. Not best, monster, not best main deck monster. This is the best card in the deck. This card is amazing. It is a quick effect to banish an S-Force card from hand, to return this card to hand, then summon an S-Force straight from the deck. That is insanely good, especially when we pair it with something like Gravitino in the deck. The fact that this searches on summon just means technically this card's a -1, but you're just going to make up for that value with Gravitino, and it loads itself back into hand, which is even more so amazing that, like, when you use Rappa, she gets back to hand. If she's getting negated ever, she stays on field. So as long as you have another S-Force to banish, she's still live on your opponent's turn, which is still, something. Still gives you the availability to get value on your opponent's turn. So really, really solid. Then you have Gravitino, of course. Like I said, on summon, he searches an S-Force card. And then the other thing that this card is nice for is it is one of the very few S-Forces that actually has a good column effect. This card says if it's in the same column, or any monster your opponent controls that's in the same column as an S-Force monster, when it would leave the field, it's actually banished instead. That is so, so good. For certain things. That's why you're always stacking your S-Forces. If you can only put 2 on the field, you're putting them in the extra monster zone. So if your opponent wants to try to link summon, they do lose their monsters. It's actually very, very important. But that's always generally the best place to throw your S-Force monsters if you only have 2. But very good. I would say this is one of those cards where I'm definitely like, dang, man, if Gravitino was level 4 or lower, that would just be like another actual good starter. But because it's level 5, your best way to get to it is Chiyomaru, which is what it is, Next up here, we have our double Platina. This is another standard piece for the engine. This card, when it is normal or special summon, can target one of your banished S-Force monsters and special summon it. The reason this card is really nice is because of Chiyomaru. So if you use Chiyomaru to banish any S-Force monster instead of a spell, trap, or whatever, you can then go into Platina. Like, you always want to go to Gravitino some way, but if you open both of these, you go Chiyomaru, banish Gravitino, summon Platina, and then Platina summons out Gravitino. And that way you have not only the Gravitino search, but you have 2 bodies on the field, which makes it a little harder to clear your board. Your trap card actually bounces cards equal to the number of S-Force monsters you control, so being able to bounce 2 instead of 1 is obviously really powerful, and this is a really nice extender. It also lowers any monster that battles an S-Force monster in the same column. Or I'm sorry, not even battles. It just loses 600. All of them lose 600 attack, which is actually not bad because Platina's 2,000, 2,200, or 22, 2,000, and then Gravitino being only 1,400 defense. That means they need something bigger than 2,000 to clear over him, and that can actually come up. Not a great effect, but a decent column effect. Which takes us to our one-ups. We have Retroactive here and a Lapswell. Sorry, Lapswell. The name is changed in the TCG, but Retroactive is really interesting. This card has a bunch of different effects. The first one is that if you are going to use, if a monster you control will be used as link material for an S-Force monster, you can use this card in hand as material. We only have the 1 link 3, but this card is still a good extender to help us climb into that. Secondly, on the field, you can quick effect during the main phase, return this card to hand to summon a level 2 or higher S-Force from the hand. That could come up later on. Definitely doesn't come up a ton right now, but still. And the last effect is if an S-Force monster would banish a card from your hand to activate its effect, you can banish this card from grave instead. Kind of the same thing that the trap does, but that's really, really good on follow-up to make sure that your Chiyomaru doesn't have to keep banishing cards from hand. You just start getting that free, like, E-Telly effect or tour guide effect, I guess, for free once you get later into the duel, which is really strong. Really cool card. I would hope that at one point we'll get a Link 2 that's like crazy. Like that's what the deck needs, in my opinion. It's like a crazy Link 2. And then maybe we'll be looking at things. But in my opinion, I think Retroactive is just a one of right now, to be honest. I think if you built your whole deck around turboing Justify turn 1, you're going to just have consistency issues. You're not going to be able to play against, you're not going to be able to do enough against like a lot of better decks. So I'm playing like a more control version where you're just trying to at least get to the trap. And then if you have a heavy S-Force hand, you can hopefully get to trap plus Justify. Usually you're going into Justify in this build on turn 3, turn 4, to kind of like solve up like simplified board states. Then there's Lapswell. If this card's special summon, you could target an S-Force Engrave and special summon it. Still good. But again, level 5, I mean, that's one of the things that makes this deck a little awkward is between Gravitino, Platina, and Lapswell, they're all just high level, which means they are awkward to draw, especially if you cannot get to Chiyomaru, because that's the whole thing, is if you can get to Chiyomaru, you can kind of just banish them for Chiyomaru's effect and you're fine. But they can break you up. And the last one I play, oh, also, sorry, the other effect is you can banish an S-Force card from your hand as cost to destroy all of your opponent's monsters in the same column as S-Force monsters. Really good. So this card is like not only reborning a monster, but also then as long as you have like something to banish or either like Retroactive or the Trap Engrave, you are then good to pay that for free and clear a board. Very good power card. I think he's actually very necessary for the deck. It's good to have like an offensive option like that, in my opinion. And then Edge Razor is the last card here. I like this guy at 1 because between the copies of the field spell and, you know, just being able to search this, right, depending on the hand, you never really need this guy, in my opinion. Like, again, like if you're trying to turbo out Justify, then I think this card's better in that type of build. But for the build we have right now, I don't think you really need to like force multiple Edge Razor into it. It's more like if you can get to him, then that's cool. Like maybe you already have Chiyomaru in hand and you just need like, and you have a good banish. Maybe you have like Chiyomaru Gravitino in hand already and the field spell. That would be an instance where you would go like field spell for Edge Razor, and then he helps you kind of like dig deeper. And also in certain matchups, keeping your opponent from linking into Link 3 or highers is actually pretty good because that's his like column effect. Is monsters in the same column as S-Forces can't be used for link material as for a Link 3 or higher. So really good. The biggest, obviously, complaint for the deck, in my opinion, is that they built this deck around having cool column effects, and other than Gravitino, there's not a single other good column effect. There's a couple of like okay ones in the right matchup. Edge Razor can be really strong. Platina can be good in certain matchups as well that like really have trouble getting over like a certain attack stat. And other than that, like the other ones just like don't really do anything for you. So I would love to see new S-Force monsters that actually have better column effects, because like, I don't know, you made like New Age like Mech Knight kind of base deck, like okay, super column based, and then you made like most of their column effects just like not worth it. But yeah, there's my monster lineup. For the S-Force stuff. For hand traps, super simple, triple Ash, 2 Veiler. I'm only playing the 2 Veiler because I am playing like the Hulk, Selene, access code little play. It's cool, it's nifty. I wouldn't expect it to come up super often, but this deck does not get super offensive in terms of putting a lot of damage on the board, so that can be a nice way to kind of just force your way into that. Not playing a ton of tuners, obviously, but if you have any of these 4 instead of like a Veiler in the deck, then you can obviously go up into the Hulk, Selene access code line, which is cool. So, you know, it's fine. They're good generic hand traps anyway. There, which takes us to the spells, triple copies of Bridgehead, and in fact, 4 copies if you include the terraforming. Triple copies of Prosperity, 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army, and 1 copy of Called by the Grave. Super standard here, mostly just consistency stuff. Obviously, Bridgehead being 4 more copies of Chiyomaru, Reinforcement of the Army being the 8th copy of Chiyomaru, and then one thing you'll notice here is I'm actually not playing Edia, the Heavenly Squire, which is like the it's this card. It's like one of the normal summons for like the Monarch deck, and it can actually summon Chiyomaru because she has Baby Monarch, or she has Squire stats, which is 800 attack, 1000 defense exactly, which he can just summon right out of the deck, but it locks you out of the extra deck, so no Justify on those turns, which isn't always the end of the world, but when that card gets hand trapped, it's like really bad. You're just stuck, right? If Chiyomaru gets hand trapped, you still have Chiyomaru on the field. Yeah, but if he gets hand trapped, it's like really, really bad, because then you just like don't even have access to Chiyomaru on future turns. So you're kind of like probably already in top deck mode. So I chose to forebode that. Most people play Extravagance in this list. That's why I'm going with Prosperity, because 8 copies of Chiyomaru plus this, which gives us a really good chance to dig for Chiyomaru. That should hopefully make up the difference in not playing like Edia the Heavenly Squire. But I definitely understand if you want to go a little more budget, play the Extravagances, and maybe I would play 2 Edia and swap it for 2 of the traps that I'm playing here. And then Called, just good. Like Ash is annoying on Chiyomaru, right? Ogre can be annoying on Chiyomaru, seeing a little more play, all that stuff, right? So just that's good as well in its own way. But that's it for the spells, mostly just consistency stuff. And because this is a control deck, it should have a hefty amount of traps for the S-Force ones. Triple Chase, 1 Specimen. Yeah, this is just good. I don't know what else to say. Chase is just amazing. It targets face-up cards up to the number of S-Force monsters you control with different names. And it, I'm sorry, double Specimen. And bounces them. But of course, don't forget, if it's a monster, if a monster's in the same column as an S-Force while Gravitino's on the field, they will be banished instead. So this card gives really high impact. And then in the grave, on a turn, except the turn it was sent to grave, let's see. You can banish this card from your graveyard instead of like banishing from hand. So for either Lapswell's effect or Chiyomaru on the follow-up effect, this card will be able to be banished instead, which is really, really good, because then you summon Chiyomaru, Chiyomaru summons another Gravitino, you search another Chase, and then you just get to do that every single turn. That's what makes this deck really tough, is if your opponent doesn't have a response for Chiyomaru to cut you off from getting to Chase, you're just going to do this every turn. You're probably going to set up multiple bounces every turn, and then it just pays for itself. You don't need to worry about having hand advantage at that point. It's just so, so strong. And then Specimen, pretty good. If your opponent controls a monster, you can target an S-Force that's banished or engraved and special summon it to the same column that an opponent's monster is in. Really good for summoning like Gravitino on your opponent's turn to then get a search and maybe get you back into like a Chiyomaru if your opponent had a response to it, or just search you a follow-up in Bridgehead, whatever you want. And then it also has an effect in grave where you can like quick banish it to then change a column. That can also be nice with like Gravitino, just to like move something over to make sure you get that banish effect. That can definitely come up for sure. Pretty good. I'm only playing 2 of this because I am playing a Trap Trick and I want that to be searchable if need be for follow-up. And even so, like, I still think it's a decent card to have. I think ideally I'd play it at 1, but I just have it at 2 just for the sole purpose of Trap Trick, just in case. So speaking of Trap Trick, we are playing a little baby suite of normal traps. I think this is a really cool idea just for cool utility, and these cards are just strong anyway. So double Punishment, double Lost Wind, double Impermanence, and the 1 Trap Trick. Didn't want to go overkill on the Trap Trick, obviously. But just having the 1 of means like essentially I'm playing 3 copies of either of these 3. You could argue I'm playing 3 Specimen and 4 Chase now of like hard copies which is really cool. Just gives you really good flexibility here. I like Lost Wind because this is a grindy deck, so the ability for this to come back. And I got kind of tight on space. I did have 3 Impermanents initially, but when I had the 1 Veiler, I was like, you know what? I want more than just a 3 of stuff that could be linked into the Hulk play, so I just changed the 3rd Impermanence for the 2nd Veiler, so 2 and 2 should be fine. And then Punishment just being really good. This deck usually doesn't even need to go into Justify very often. Like, honestly, you don't need it. It's just there if it's nice, and otherwise you can just totally win duels. You win a lot of duels just not even going into your extra deck. So Punishment is just such a good utility card, multiple removals. And if you can't get Gravitino on field, sometimes having like actual destruction removal can be really, really useful as opposed to the Chase, right? Because if you're bouncing everything, but you're playing against something like weird, like Guru, right? You don't want to be giving them all their cards back to the hand, because then they're just going to plus again, right? By like playing those cards, and you don't want to load those back. So having something like Punishment feels really good. And then the final piece of the main deck is Solemn Strike at 3. It's Solemn Strike. Like, we're already playing a good amount of traps, so being able to like set this plus a Lost Wind is actually like really good into boards a lot of the time. I'm finding, and it's just a really good trap, right? Good going first, good going second, like no complaints. So that is it for the main deck. 40, of course, in the main, which takes us to the extra. Starting off, of course, is double Justify. Normally, I'd play 3 of this if you're playing Extravagance, but I'm playing Prosperity, so you never have to banish this if you don't need to. you know, Phoenix, Unicorn, just basic shiz, right? Dark and Lina. The cool thing about these two is actually that the whole deck is light and dark. If you look at the main deck, Chiyomaru is dark, Gravitino is light, Platina is dark, Retroactive is light, Lapswell is light, S4's Edrazor is dark. The whole deck is light and dark. So actually making these is super easy. So you could potentially like reborn a DPE for your opponent's grave and help respond to that, which is kind of cool. Which I like, and then they float and potentially search stuff. You know, dark float, search Chiyomaru is kind of cool. And then, of course, you just play the Hulk, the Celine, and the access code for this play. Really cool. If you don't know how this works, you go Hulk. If you just like normal, a Veiler, or a Ash Blossom, link into Crystron Hockey Fibrax, make Celine, or summon a Veiler out of the deck, make Celine. As long as there's 3 spells in grave between you and your opponent, summon back the Veiler in your grave, and then take Celine and the Veiler into an access code. And this will be at least a 2-pop access code off of 1 monster on field and then normal summoning a tuner. It's pretty cool, but like since the deck just doesn't need the extra deck at all, you can just play stuff like this that won't come up all the time, but like when it does, it could be like so crazy and just game winning. So the other thing too is also with these two, you could, as long as you have either Platina or a Veiler in grave, Platina actually is a spellcaster, you could be able to just make one of these, revive any opponent's monster, go into Celine with these, Celine effect, revive Platina or Veiler in grave, and then still get to access code. So a couple different ways to just like get into power plays with access code to just wipe a board and just, you know, completely simplify a board state is it's pretty cool. Comes up. Not all the time, but like it can. And then just fun stuff. Borrowcode Dragon in the top logic, 0 Boros. Again, just cool stuff that like I guess if you can get into, like, you know, it could come up, I guess. Wouldn't expect it to, but you know, versus like random decks, it could be like kind of nice against. And then double Intis and the 1 Pegasus. We're only playing 2 of the punishment, so like just in case you end up ever seeing 2 in a duel, you'll have both of these in the extra. But then when Pegasus also just being an additional target can be so annoying for your opponent to have to work around, because it means they never want to destroy anything on your field because you'll just punish them with the Wind Pegasus. And then Pleiades. So Gravitino is actually a level 5 light monster, so you can actually just hard make Pleiades with Gravitino. You can also mess around with like Ptolemy M7, where you could like make Pleiades, bounce something on your turn, pass turn, bounce something on your opponent's turn, then overlay for a Ptolemy M7 on your next turn, and then potentially attack and just make a Zeus as well. So you could try and play that stuff, but this deck doesn't share like any levels. Like Chiyomaru is level 2, Gravitino is level 5, 6 for Platina, 1 for Retroactive, 6 for Lapswell. So I guess the odds of putting Lapswell and Platina, you could maybe play a rank 6, but I don't know what rank 6 is generically good enough to make that worth. And then level 4 for Edrazor. So there's like, the deck doesn't share like hardly any levels. So Pleiades is just like already, we know Pleiades is kind of an insane rank 5. So might as well take advantage of it if the deck can potentially make it in specific situations. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The deck's cool. I still do like the deck. The deck has a couple of very, very strong points, of course, being Chiyomaru, Justify, and I would say Chase. These are your 3 big, like, most important cards. Like, this card's really crazy to get your plays going. These are 2 really strong interruption/win conditions. And yeah, so just hopefully Konami doesn't forget about this archetype. I would love it if we keep getting more stuff. Like, again, like a couple more main deck monsters, maybe to just power creep what we have. And I've also thrown out the idea of like a Link 2. I know that this guy needs 3 monsters to make it, but like, what if we get a Link 2 that like summons an S-Force from Grave and from Banish when it's summoned? Like, that could be pretty cool, because that means if you do like a Chiyomaru play, banishing something and then like putting 2 monsters on the field, you could like retroactive into the Link 2, reborn something from Grave, and then reborn something that from Banish, and that would give you either material for Justify or to do something else. I don't know. Just gives you another power play. I'd still like to see that. It feels like a Link 2 would just make so much sense in the deck, especially with retroactive. He seems okay right now, and a cool like target to have searchable. Also, Rhoda can get him as well, not just Chiyomaru. I didn't mention that earlier because he's a warrior, but yeah, he just feels like he's cool right now. Like he's a cool play to be able to go into, a cool extender to be able to make use of, and maybe down the line he'll actually be like a really, really strong extender, like the coders are in Code Talker, where like they actually have like a really good set of like links to be able to go into. But until then, it's just Justify, and that's still good, but it's not great. He's kind of just a walking impermanence disruption wise, and I'd like to see something a little different there down the line utility wise, but we'll see. Otherwise, really cool deck. You know, not going to complain. I love their designs. I like the way they play. I just want to see a couple of better column effects. So Konami, get on that. But that's going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. As always, subscribe to the channel if you have not seen yet what else I have going on, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.